National security editor Nick Paton Walsh gained rare access to newly liberated Ukrainian territory, and what he found was very disturbing. We do want to warn you that this report contains graphic images.
We don't leave our own behind. A Russian war slogan you hear less these days, especially along the road south by the Dnieper River, where the Russians seem to be collapsing since the weekend on yet a third front.
The pace of Ukraine's advance you can feel on the roads here, and it is hour by hour that they move forwards. This road lined with Russian bodies, abandoned Russian positions. It's clear people left here in a hurry.
In just the last 3 days, they've swept along the west bank of the river through Russian positions, the shallow, shabby foxholes of an army with almost nothing at hand. Even what little they had was abandoned, especially this tank, a model that first came into service 60 years ago, when Vladimir Putin was 9. Here, the village of Mykolaiivka, right on the river, is getting cell phone service for the first time in 6 months, and aid. Shells slammed into here 90 minutes ago from the Russians still across the water. It's the price of their freedom. The Russians would check on us, she says, tried to make us vote in the referendum, but we didn't. Still, we survived. We old people always have food supplies. Outside the village are more of the short-lived occupation. Left in the tree line with a sleeping mat and shells. In nearby Lubomivka, there was heavy fighting Saturday, and then Sunday, the Russians just vanished. Gratitude for aid and liberation going spare to almost anyone. Smiles at it is over, and shock at how fast. It was very scary. We were afraid, she says, hiding. They were bombing, robbing. We survived. They ran. The rain came, and they ran. Signs all around of how their unwanted guests just did not know what to do when they got here, or have food or beds. So they filled that gap with cruelty. Andrei had a generator and would charge locals' phones. So the Russians decided he was a Ukrainian informer and beat him. They brought me from here and they put a hood on my head and taped it up, he says. Then we walked a few steps up and down. They beat him so badly, his arms turned blue from defending his head. Still there, months later. Stalemate had torn these huge expanses up for months. Now it's broken, as has the fear of the Kremlin's army here. Bereft, abandoned, filthy, and vanishing down the road.
There's something startling about what's happening in the south, because after we saw the advance in the northeast around Kharkiv, that was itself an extraordinary loss of territory that Russia had fought so hard for. Then we saw just at the weekend how they were losing fast in the east, giving up the strategic town of Lyman. Now in the south, a much bigger, potentially more consequential and embarrassing loss for Russia. They are losing at the fastest pace, frankly, I've seen yet so far in 6 months of being here. It is remarkable. It's unclear quite how sustainable Russia's presence on that side of the river actually is. And this isn't really because the Ukrainian military has somehow become superhuman overnight. It seems to be because Russia's positions are poorly supplied, poorly managed, and essentially slowly collapsing when they're very carefully and very persistently attacked by the Ukrainians. Pamela?
Nick Paton Walsh, excellent reporting as always from Ukraine. Thanks so much. And let's get more on all of this. Democratic Congressman Jim Hines of Connecticut, a member of the House Intelligence Committee. You just heard Nick's report there. Your reaction to that, just how significant are these Ukrainian advances in the east and south, in your view?
Well, they're really significant. Put yourself in the shoes of the Russian soldiers who both committed these war crimes that were detailed so explicitly there, who are implicated in war crimes throughout Ukraine. They're hungry. They're using 30, 40-year-old military equipment. They're at severe risk of being killed. And even in the best case scenario, they will be tried for war crimes, one hopes. And that's true of junior officers. And so it's really important, I think, that they understand that they are at the tip of a crumbling spear in a terrible, terrible mistake. That obviously has implications for us. You know, how Putin responds is a frightening and complicated question. But the performance of the Ukrainians has been amazing, and it's really remarkable to see.
That's always the fear. How is Putin going to respond as his desperation grows? I want to ask you about this new reporting coming in. We're learning that the U.S. intelligence community believes elements of the Ukrainian government authorized that August car bombing of a Russian target outside of Moscow. Does that line up with your understanding as a member of the intelligence committee?
Yeah, Pam, that is not something I can comment on publicly. It's obviously of some interest to the United States because if those reports are true, and again, I don't want to comment either way, you know, that raises the specter of arguably Ukraine losing very clear moral high ground. Ukraine, apart from the military momentum right now, has clear moral high ground. And we want to make sure that that is retained and that this doesn't become a two-sided thing where Putin can arguably say, well, you know, the other side is killing civilians too while he is butchering civilians. So again, I sadly can't comment on the particulars of that, but you know, we certainly hope that the Ukrainians using Western NATO US aid are behaving in a way consistent with maintaining the moral high ground that they have.
But have you been briefed on it? I mean, do you know do you have an understanding of what happened?
Again, I can't comment on the particularities.
I'm not
there.
asking, I'm just saying, have you been briefed? Right, go ahead.
That question is of real interest to the U.S. government because we do have such a profound interest in making sure that the Ukrainians not only maintain the moral high ground, but they don't do things, because let's face it, they're being enormously aggressive. You see that on the battlefield in the report that you just saw on from your correspondent Nick. They're being enormously aggressive. There is a point where aggressiveness could actually begin to harm their cause. So again, I can't get into what I do or don't know from United States intelligence sources, but it's a real concern for the United States that the Ukrainians don't get too far out in front of what is acceptable practice.
But our reporting is that there were elements of the Ukrainian government that that were involved in this. Is it a mistake? Based on our reporting, you don't have to speak to what you were briefed on. Is it a mistake? Based on that.
Well, again, I can't.
I know, but based on our reporting,
I'm not in a position to confirm. Yeah, I'm not in a position to comment on your reporting on something that you know is both strategically and from a sources and methods standpoint really pretty sensitive.
All right, Congressman Jim Himes, thank you so much.
Thank you.